Thank you, Justice Kagan. I now recognize myself for questions. Chief Justice Roberts himself referenced a rise in threats in the judicial branch in his 2024 year-end report. He specifically cited more than 1,000 threats investigated against federal judges in just the preceding 5 years. Would you talk about how the volume and nature of threats against the court has changed over the past several years, particularly following the Dobbs decision and the 2022 incident at Justin Kavanaugh's home? Is the threat level changed in 2026, and what do you believe is driving that trend?
The numbers, as you've mentioned, it was up 25% last year, on track for 38% this year, and those...
Microphone, please.
Good?
Yes.
And those statistics sound abstract, but being on the receiving end of them is not. So I thought I would just share a little bit about how the threats have affected me and my family personally. They have required me to, or my children, to think about and see things that children should not have to see or think about. One example is when threats to my life were particularly intense a few years ago around the time of the Dobbs leak. My security detail sent me home with a bulletproof vest, and I carried it into my house, put it into my bedroom, dropped it down on a table, turned around, and my 12-year-old son was standing in the doorway of my bedroom, and he wanted to know what it was and why I had it, and I didn't know how to respond because maybe I lack imagination, but I didn't expect that performing this service was going to put me in the position of explaining to my children what a bulletproof vest was and why I had to wear one. It's also been reported in the news that roughly 6 weeks ago, I was the victim of a swatting incident. At that point, my teenage son, one of my teenage sons, opened the door to go out with friends and saw in our street, it was full of police cars who had responded to a false report of gunshots and raised voices in my home. I was very, very grateful that I had Supreme Court police outside my home because they were able to stop and meet with and explain to the county police that it had been a false alarm, and so the police did not actually attempt to enter our home. Many of us, me included, have received threatening anonymous deliveries designed to intimidate and harass us. They are often sent in the name of Judge Salas's son, who I think, as you mentioned in the beginning, Mr. Chairman, is deceased because he was killed by a disgruntled lawyer who showed up at Judge Salas's home intending to kill her, but her son, 20 years old at the time, opened the door and took the bullet instead. Her husband, standing behind, was seriously injured. So I think the message on these deliveries being sent in his name is clear. As Justice Kagan said, federal judges across the country, throughout the judiciary, including the Supreme Court, continue to do their jobs without fear or favor, but the threat level is really high.
Over the last few years, we've seen an increase in First Amendment-related activity around D.C., including the Supreme Court campus. The Supreme Court building itself has had perimeter fencing up at various points in recent years. What is the current state of permanent physical security upgrades to the building, and how much of this budget request is dedicated to capital improvements versus ongoing personnel costs?
I think, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, feel free.
Most of the money for this increase is personnel and not building arrangements. We have occasionally put up perimeter fences. We don't like that. We want to express a commitment to be open and transparent to the public, as I know other governmental institutions do as well. Occasionally, we have found it necessary, given the threat level, to put up some barriers, but they come down as quickly as we can take them down. So some small part of the funding request is for building improvements, but mostly it's for security personnel.
Protecting the court and justice involves coordination between the Supreme Court police, obviously, the U.S. Marshal Service, Secret Service, Capitol Police, and local law enforcement, depending on your location. Would you walk us through how those responsibilities are divided and whether there are any gaps or redundancies in the structure that we should be aware of?
We are primarily taken care of by the Supreme Court Police. When we needed additional residential security and the Supreme Court Police was unable to staff that, the Marshal Service did help us, and so our homes were protected by the Marshal Service. I might be wrong about this, 2 years or so. The Marshal Service was not able to sustain that level of support, and so they asked the Supreme Court Police to take that over, and the Supreme Court Police is now doing that with the help of contractors. We coordinate with Marshal Service, sometimes in travel, but really the Supreme Court Police does the bulk of it. And I think for physical safety, there's coordination with the Capitol Police, given that our grounds are so close.
And I should say we like it that way, to have our own police force rather than to be reliant on the Marshal Service, which is within the Department of Justice. This way, we just get more control over our own security arrangements. Some of you may recall that last year we asked for a supplemental request, and that was to deal with the problem that we had thought that we had a longer stretch of time to make the transition between the Marshal Service and the Supreme Court Police. In the end, we had to make it more quickly than we thought we would. And we're very grateful to the various committees in both the House and Senate for making sure that we had the supplemental monies that that enabled us to make that transition more quickly than we had thought was necessary.